Elias's hands were calloused, a testament to years of labor under the sun. The fields had not been kind that year, but his heart remained unyielding. As he and his young daughter, Anya, trudged through the muddy path, the storm mirrored the weight of their struggles. The wind howled, yet Anya's small hand clinging to his reminded him of his purpose: to provide, to protect, and to endure. It was in this harsh reality that his compassion shone brightest. The road home was treacherous, with puddles turning into miniature lakes. Anya's tiny shoes were soaked, but she didn't complain. Instead, she hummed a soft tune, trying to keep her father's spirits high. Elias glanced down at her, his heart swelling with pride. She was too young to understand the depth of their hardships, but her resilience was a light in the storm. Even in his weariness, Elias couldn't help but smile. As they rounded a bend, the faint glow of lanterns pierced the storm's veil. The sight was peculiar: a lavish carriage stuck in the mud, its grandeur entirely out of place on such a desolate road. Elias hesitated for a moment, torn between his need to reach home and his innate desire to help. His farmer's intuition told him this was no ordinary traveler. His tired legs paused, his heart leaning toward empathy. Anya tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Papa, someone needs help," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. Elias crouched beside her, shielding her from the rain. "Stay close to me," he instructed, his voice firm but kind. Together, they approached the scene, their steps cautious yet purposeful. The closer they got, the clearer the situation became. A woman stood by the carriage, drenched and visibly distressed. Her ornate gown clung to her frame, and her delicate hands gripped the edges of her cloak. Despite the storm's fury, her presence exuded an air of importance. Elias felt a pang of unease. What business did someone of her stature have in these conditions? Elias cleared his throat, his deep voice cutting through the rain. "Do you need assistance, ma'am?" he asked, his tone respectful but not servile. The woman turned sharply, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, she seemed unsure whether to trust him, but the sincerity in his expression, coupled with Anya's innocent gaze, dissolved her hesitation. The woman nodded, her voice trembling. "Our carriage, the wheel, it's broken. My escort, they've not arrived." Elias glanced at the carriage, his experienced eye immediately identifying the issue. It would take effort and ingenuity, but it wasn't beyond his capabilities. He looked down at Anya, who nodded eagerly, as if to say, "We can do this, Papa." And so, Elias made a decision. With the storm as their witness, he rolled up his sleeves and prepared to help. Compassion, after all, was his true strength, even in the face of exhaustion. Little did he know, this small act of kindness would change the course of his life forever. The storm raged on, relentless and unforgiving, as Princess Eleanor stood by the broken carriage. Her soaked cloak clung to her shoulders, and her once pristine shoes were caked in mud. This was a far cry from the polished halls of the castle she called home. Her breath came in quick bursts, partly from the cold, partly from the anxiety of being stranded in such unfamiliar territory. Each passing minute felt heavier, the weight of her royal responsibilities pressing against her chest. The night carried an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional clap of thunder. Eleanor's escort was nowhere in sight, and she couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. Despite her royal title, she was just another soul in need at that moment. Her heart ached with worry. She had a critical meeting to attend at the castle, one that could determine the future of her kingdom. But here she was, trapped by the whims of fate and a storm's fury. Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, seeking warmth that the rain refused to offer. Her thoughts drifted to her father, the king, who often spoke of the value of compassion and resilience. "A ruler's strength lies not in their crown, but in their heart," he would say. Those words echoed in her mind, giving her a glimmer of hope. Perhaps someone, anyone, would come to her aid. Still, as the minutes dragged on, doubt began to creep in. She glanced at the carriage, its ornate design now a shadow of its grandeur, the wheel hopelessly lodged in the mud. The driver had left to seek help hours ago, leaving her alone with her fears. Eleanor had always been sheltered, her royal life a bubble of privilege. Yet tonight, she felt the harsh realities of the world outside the palace walls. It was humbling, even unsettling, to feel so exposed. Just as despair threatened to take hold, Eleanor noticed movement in the distance. A faint light bobbed through the darkness, drawing closer with each passing second. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this help or another test of her endurance? She steadied herself, adjusting her posture to project confidence, though her hands trembled beneath her cloak. When the figures emerged from the storm, Eleanor's first thought was surprise. A rugged man, clearly a farmer, and a young girl stood before her. Their clothes were plain, their demeanor humble, yet there was a warmth in their eyes that no royal court could replicate. The farmer spoke first, his voice steady despite the storm. "Do you need help, ma'am?" he asked, his tone devoid of judgment, only genuine concern. For a moment, Eleanor hesitated. Trusting strangers was not something she had been taught to do. But the sincerity in their faces, especially the girl's innocent curiosity, broke down her walls. She nodded, her voice soft but resolute. "Yes, our carriage is broken. I need to reach the castle urgently." The words felt strange coming from her lips, an admission of vulnerability, a plea for assistance. As the farmer examined the damage, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Here was a man who likely had his own struggles, yet he was willing to help her without hesitation. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, a lesson in humility and the unexpected strength of empathy. And so, as the storm continued its tirade, the first threads of an unlikely bond began to weave themselves. Elias knelt beside the carriage, his hands already caked with mud and grime. The wheel was damaged more than he had initially thought, but he didn't let that deter him. Anya stood close by, holding the lantern with steady hands, her young eyes wide with both awe and determination. The rain continued to fall, but Elias's focus never wavered. Fixing things was second nature to him, a skill honed from years of repairing tools and machinery on his modest farm. Princess Eleanor watched in silence, her royal pride slowly giving way to quiet admiration. This man, a complete stranger, was pouring his strength into helping her, expecting nothing in return. She found herself wondering about his life, the struggles etched into the lines of his face. Compassion, she realized, wasn't reserved for grand gestures in courtrooms. It thrived in the quiet, selfless acts of people like him. The lantern's glow flickered as the wind howled, but Anya stood firm. Her small frame belied a spirit as strong as her father's. "Papa, will it work?" she asked, her voice tinged with hope. Elias smiled at her, his hands never stopping. "It will, my little lantern," he replied, his words carrying a warmth that even the storm couldn't extinguish. It was moments like these that revealed the depth of his character, resilient, tender, and unwaveringly kind. Each twist of the wheel and every adjustment Elias made felt like a battle against the elements. The mud threatened to pull him down, the rain obscured his vision, but he persevered. His thoughts were simple. Someone needed help, and he could provide it. It wasn't about reward or recognition. It was about doing what was right. It was this quiet heroism that set him apart, though he would never see himself that way. Princess Eleanor felt a lump in her throat as she observed the scene. It wasn't just the physical labor that moved her. It was the care with which Elias approached the task. He treated the carriage as though it were his own, pouring not just effort, but also heart into every motion. She felt a pang of guilt. This was a man who likely had little to give, yet he offered everything. The contrast to her sheltered life was stark and humbling. Anya's lantern wavered slightly as the rain intensified, but her resolve never faltered. She looked up at Eleanor with a shy smile, as if to reassure the princess that her father would succeed. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a profound message. Hope thrives even in the bleakest of circumstances. Eleanor returned the smile, feeling an unexpected warmth in her chest. After what felt like hours, Elias straightened up, wiping the sweat and rain from his brow. "It's done," he said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. The wheel had been repaired, the carriage once again fit for travel. Eleanor stared at him, struggling to find the words. Gratitude didn't feel like enough. How could she ever repay such selflessness? But before she could speak, Elias turned to Anya, his expression gentle. "Come, my little helper. Let's see if the princess can reach her castle now." His words carried no expectation, only the quiet satisfaction of having helped someone in need. And as the carriage stood ready, the air seemed to shift, not just from the storm's passing, but from the seeds of something extraordinary taking root. Princess Eleanor stepped toward Elias, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't quite articulate. The storm was subsiding, but its echoes remained, both in the air and in her thoughts. This farmer, a man with so little to spare, had given her more than just the means to continue her journey. He had given her a glimpse of humanity's true essence, compassion in its purest form. How could she express her gratitude in a way that matched the depth of his kindness? Elias brushed the mud from his hands, his face lined with fatigue yet softened by a quiet pride. He expected nothing more than a polite nod or a word of thanks. But when Eleanor stepped closer, her gaze unwavering, he noticed something unusual in her expression. It wasn't just gratitude. It was determination, as though she had decided on something far greater than mere words. With a trembling hand, Eleanor reached into her cloak, retrieving a pouch of gold coins. The weight of the gesture wasn't lost on her. This wasn't charity. It was acknowledgement. "Please, take this," she said, her voice firm yet laced with vulnerability. "You've done more for me tonight than I could have ever asked." She held out the pouch, but Elias hesitated, his humility battling with the reality of his struggles. Anya's eyes widened as she glanced at the pouch. She tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering, "Papa, it's so much." Elias looked down at her, then back at Eleanor. "I don't do this for gold, ma'am," he said softly, his voice steady. "Helping you was the right thing to do." His words hung in the air, a testament to his integrity. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She had something far more profound in mind. The princess took a step closer, her tone growing resolute. "Elias," she began, "your kindness is rare, and it deserves recognition. I want you to come to the castle, not as a guest, but as the royal steward." Her words stunned him into silence. The offer was unimaginable, a leap from his humble existence into a world he had only heard of in passing. Even Anya gasped, her young mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of the moment. Elias blinked, his mind racing. The castle? A royal steward? The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's story. "Your Highness, I'm just a farmer," he said, his voice almost a whisper. But Eleanor's expression remained steadfast. "And you're a man of honor, the kind of person this kingdom needs," she replied. "Please, let me repay your kindness by giving you a chance to change your life." Anya clung to her father's side, her wide eyes brimming with hope. "Papa, maybe this is a blessing," she whispered. Elias looked down at her, his heart torn between his humble roots and the opportunity being handed to him. The storm had brought them together, but now, it seemed to offer more than just a fleeting connection. It offered a future. Eleanor extended her hand, her gaze unwavering. "Say yes, Elias. Not just for yourself, but for her," she said, nodding toward Anya. And in that moment, as the rain gave way to a gentle breeze, the farmer realized that some storms, no matter how fierce, leave behind the seeds of something extraordinary. The news spread like wildfire, carried by the whispers of townsfolk and the proclamations of royal messengers. A humble farmer, known only as Elias, had repaired the princess's carriage during a storm and been rewarded with a position in the royal court. It wasn't just the act itself that captivated people, it was the message it carried. Compassion, they realized, had the power to rewrite even the most improbable stories. The kingdom buzzed with curiosity, each retelling adding a new layer of wonder. In the castle, Elias's transition to his new role was nothing short of transformative. The once tired farmer now stood amidst marble halls and gilded ceilings, his weathered hands learning the intricacies of stewardship. Yet, his humility remained unshaken. He greeted everyone, from servants to nobles, with the same warmth that had once drawn Princess Eleanor to trust him. His story became a beacon, a reminder that even the smallest actions could inspire profound change. Eleanor, too, found herself changed by the experience. For the first time, she saw her people not as subjects, but as individuals with stories of their own. She began visiting villages, listening to farmers, merchants, and craftsmen. Elias's influence had reached her deeply, reminding her that a kingdom's strength lay in its people, not just its walls or wealth. Her newfound empathy softened her once imposing demeanor, endearing her to the hearts of her subjects. Children in the kingdom played games inspired by the tale, pretending to be Elias or Princess Eleanor. They built makeshift carriages, acting out the moment the farmer repaired the wheel. Parents, seeing the story as a teachable moment, used it to instill values of kindness and generosity. Elias's name became synonymous with hope, and even the elders whispered prayers for the farmer who had taught a princess and a kingdom, a lesson in humanity. But while the story inspired joy, it also sparked introspection. Many in the court began to question their own priorities. Was their wealth and privilege being used to uplift others, or merely to secure their own comfort? Elias's rise served as a gentle nudge, urging them to look beyond their gilded walls and see the struggles of those who had built the very foundations of the kingdom. His presence, quiet yet impactful, became a catalyst for subtle but meaningful change. Elias's daughter, Anya, became a symbol of innocence and hope. Her unwavering support for her father during that stormy night was recounted as often as the tale of the carriage itself. She roamed the castle with wide-eyed curiosity, her laughter filling its once solemn halls. The bond between Elias and Anya was a living testament to the power of family, resilience, and mutual love. The people adored her as much as they did her father, seeing in her the promise of a brighter future. The story even reached neighboring kingdoms, where rulers sent envoys to learn more about the farmer who had won the princess's favor. Some dismissed it as mere folklore, but others saw it as a reminder of what leadership should embody: empathy, humility, and a commitment to one's people. Eleanor's act of gratitude had sent ripples far beyond her own borders, creating a legacy that transcended geography and politics. And so, Elias's act of kindness became more than just a tale. It became a movement. In taverns and town squares, by fireplaces and in fields, people retold the story, each word a spark of inspiration. Compassion, they believed, was not a trait reserved for heroes or royals. It was a choice available to anyone willing to make it. And as the kingdom thrived under this newfound sense of unity, one thing became clear. Sometimes, the smallest acts truly do have the greatest impact.